We're going to go ahead and jump into Q&A. There was a couple questions, a couple themes that I'll try to synthesize for the sake of time. Quickly for Nadeem, there was a question about if the study accounted for gender differences. So if you can comment on that. And then also just there was a couple other questions around the theme of certain mosques are unsafe for women and they're not welcome and so on.
So yes, we do have data on gender differences. We're still analyzing the data, but preliminarily we can definitely say that yes, there is a difference in experiences that sisters have versus brothers have at the masjid. Brothers tend to have a lot more access, a lot more activities to the masjid than sisters do, particularly in terms of sports activities. Brothers will be hogging the gym. They're playing basketball every single day. And the brothers can play outside in the summer. Sisters are still not playing outside in the summer or winter. So making clear effort to have, dedicated days for sisters, not just 1 hour a week, but, whole time periods so that people can come in. And then access to the imams, to the scholars. Brothers can just walk out right after the khutbah or right after salah, sometimes say, "Assalamu alaikum," start talking. Sisters are not always able to do that. And so having access to the knowledge is also challenging. So there's definitely differences in the genders and their ability to access all of the facilities within the masjid. Sometimes the masjid structure, physical, we see some of the masajid, they were built at a particular point in time. It's difficult to change the physical structure now, but unfortunately, because of that physical structure, it causes problems. So the library is right next to the brothers' entrance. The sisters' entrance is so far away, and the sisters have to essentially fight through the brothers to get to the library, back when people actually accessed libraries. And then the library now is being used for so many other things, but basically you're excluding sisters from being able to access that space. So being mindful of that definitely has an impact, because the young sisters are going to have a very different experience, the young brothers will. And so this is upon the leadership and us as a community to address that and find ways around it. Sometimes the physical structures can't be changed, but there are ways to do other things that we can have some innovative solutions to, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. The next question is, a brother left his religion due to the lack of interpersonal connections and the attitudes of the head masjid leadership. What can be done to bring him back to Islam?
Jazakumullah khairan. SubhanAllah, there's going to be a session, I think, later on in the day about some of the challenges of people failing or falling backwards and picking them up, and resilience and things of that sort. So inshallah, we'll talk a little bit more about this specific issue at that time. But my advice would be to keep connections with those people. Always keep connections with people, right? Even if people do things that may be unfortunate or sinful, don't approve of their sin, but always have that connection or that relationship, because what happens is that if we keep pushing people away, they'll get further and further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the forgiveness and tawbah. But if there's some kind of connection there between you and that person, just even casually, right? Not necessarily going to go and be best friends with the person, but look, we're playing basketball, you want to play basketball with us, things of that sort. Then it might be like that person, it's never so simple that a person just has that interpersonal. Yes, it can have an impact, but a lot of times people go through stages and phases in their life that person might need somebody to reach out to. And if you're kind to somebody, they'll remember that in their moments of weakness and be like, you know what, that person, whatever happened, that person never just left me. So now I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to have a conversation with them. And I'll talk in that session about some people during the time of the companions radiallahu anhum that left Islam and came back. Some people contemporarily that left Islam and came back, and how they did that, right? But one of the key factors is that people didn't abandon them completely. People kept those connections with them. Yes, if they were praying, this person left Islam, so he's no longer praying, that's difficult. But they would continue to pray. They would continue to call that person. And then sometimes what happens is that person, whatever difficulties that they were going through in that specific period of time in their life, they'll start to go away and they feel like, you know what, I thought that I would find peace somewhere else, but I really didn't. And now I feel like, I'm going to try this Islam thing again. And then a lot of people do come back to Islam that way, right? So I'll share some of those stories at that session, inshallah. But my just humble request to everybody. Yes, people do things that are very concerning. But remember, the door of rahmah and maghfirah and tawbah to Allah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is open until a person has the last breath in their lives or until the sun rises from the west, right? So never lose hope. لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. Time for one last question, inshallah, which is just synthesizing a couple questions about. Somebody said that they want to talk to their board, the masjid board, about getting youth involved, but they're not really finding a lot of success with it. A couple other questions highlighting its importance, some success stories, but a lot of challenges there. So how can we approach masjid leadership to get youth involved? This will be the final question.
I think sometimes just not only for the masajid, but just organizationally, one of the things that people sometimes have difficulty with is to hear ideas from other people and feel like they're being forced into a situation. What I would recommend and suggest is going to the masjid leadership and having a discussion with them, right? And saying that, I've heard at this conference or the convention that a lot of youth feel like they're not involved in the community. What do you think is a way to get them involved, right? So make them part of the planning process and make the board, the imam, a lot of them think that it's not, they think that it's their idea, but make them involved in the process so they don't feel like it's coming from outside. And when they have that leadership, when they have that control, they won't feel threatened. Because a lot of times that's what people feel. That, you know what, I've been in this community for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. These young people are going to come in and change everything that we held on to. And a lot of times, none of our, alhamdulillah, our youth's intentions are not like that. It's just to get them involved and see how the things are learning and processes and things of that sort. So even for imams, I know some imams that are very defensive at times, especially, and I want to say this, especially people who are, never mind, we'll talk about that in another session, inshallah. There are certain times that people get defensive, but there's no reason to do that, right? So to have a conversation, a non-threatening conversation, be like, look, we want to get youth involved. What are some ideas that you have? And have that brainstorming session early on. Don't have a brainstorming session outside without their knowledge and say, this is what we decided as a community. This is what we want. Then people put up their guards. But if you make them part of the process and say that, look, we know that this is a challenge that we face, and how can we address it, then a lot of times, a lot of communities will, listen. Allahu A'lam.
I'll just add one quick thing. I know running out of time here. One of the things I've noticed with any human being, I could say, is that people feel threatened for their own position. People feel threatened for their authority. They feel like somebody's going to come and undermine something. They're going to take away. I spent 20 years at this masjid. Now these young people are coming up. They want to kick me out. And so on and so forth, right? So there's a natural thinking for a lot of people that I'm going to say no to these ideas because I got to entrench and safeguard what I have built over the 20, 30 years. And one of the ways to deal with that is to essentially disarm them. Say, listen, nobody's here to take away your authority. Nobody's here to move you out or something. We want to build on what you have done. Like you think about the positive way and say, listen, this can be your sadaqah jariyah. That you will die tomorrow, day after, at some point. You will need to retire. Do you want to be dragged out or do you want to build on top of it? Let us build on your legacy rather than somebody has to push you out and say, we have to demolish what you built because it was not good, and then we build something else. We don't want to do that. How can we build on top of this solid foundation that you built? Butter them up a little bit. Make it nice. It's like, yeah, all right, you got to build on this foundation. You did an amazing job building this foundation, but it catered to people in the 80s and 90s, which was awesome. But our kids are growing up in this century. My daughters keep reminding me, I was born in the last century and they were all born in this century. I'm like, yeah, I can't help it. I'm an old man. But that's how young people think. We all were born in the last century, literally. And so this foundation was awesome, but we need to renovate it, make it much more accessible. How can we do that? So using this type of language to make it more inclusive and less threatening to them makes them start thinking, and then on top of what Sheikh Ridwan just said, you know, makes it much more inviting. All right, let's build on something together, make it a much more better future for all of us.
Jazakumullah khairan to both of the speakers. Also, Jazakumullah khairan to the attendees for your beautiful listening. We'll go ahead and end. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillah.